The ivory envelope sat on Leela's kitchen counter like a snake ready to strike. Her hands shook as she read the elegant script for the third time. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison Whitmore request the pleasure of your company at the wedding of their son, James Harrison Whitmore III, to Miss Caroline Elizabeth Sterling. The date was just 2 weeks away. 3 years had passed since her divorce from James, 3 years since his family had made it clear that a black woman would never be good enough for their precious son. Now they were inviting her to watch him marry someone else, someone white. Someone they approved of. Leela's throat tightened as she remembered the last family dinner she had attended as James's wife. His mother, Victoria, had served her on paper plates while everyone else ate from fine china. His father had asked her to help serve the food, assuming she was the help. When James had introduced her as his wife, the silence that followed felt like death itself. She threw the invitation across the room, watching it flutter to the hardwood floor like a dying bird. They wanted to see her broken. They wanted to watch her cry as their son married his proper bride. They probably expected her to show up desperate and pathetic, begging for scraps of attention from the man who had once promised to love her forever. The worst part was not knowing if James had agreed to this cruel joke. Had he laughed when his mother suggested inviting his ex-wife to his wedding? Had he signed off on this final humiliation? Leela walked to her bathroom mirror and stared at her reflection. Her dark skin was flawless, her natural hair was healthy and full, and her brown eyes still held the fire that had first attracted James 5 years ago. She was not the same broken woman who had signed those divorce papers with tears streaming down her face. "They want to see me fall," she whispered to her reflection. "But I'm not the same woman they destroyed." She picked up the invitation from the floor and read it one more time. This time, she smiled. They had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed she would stay down after they knocked her down. They had no idea what she had built from the ashes of their marriage. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Nicole. "Girl, you better not be thinking about going to that wedding." Leela typed back, "Oh, I'm going. But not for the reasons they think." She had spent 3 years rebuilding herself from nothing. 3 years creating something beautiful from the pain they had caused. Now it was time to show them exactly who Leela Johnson had become. The invitation had one line at the bottom that made her laugh out loud. "Black tie optional." Of course it was. They probably thought she could not afford proper attire for their high society event. They probably imagined her showing up in something cheap and inappropriate, confirming all their worst opinions about her. Leela walked to her closet and pushed aside the casual clothes she wore to her office every day. In the back, covered in protective plastic, hung the dress she had been saving for a special occasion. She had bought it 6 months ago with her first $1 million profit check. It was time to let the world see what a queen looked like. She pulled out her laptop and began making calls. If the Whitmore family wanted to play games, she would show them how the game was really played. They had taught her that appearances mattered in their world. They had shown her that respect came from power and money. Well, she had both now. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed James's number. Her heart stopped for a moment before she declined the call. She was not ready to talk to him yet. Not until she was prepared for whatever lies he might tell her about this invitation. The phone rang again immediately. This time she answered. "Hello, James." "Leela, I just found out about the invitation. I had no idea my mother sent it. I'm so sorry." His voice sounded tired, older than she remembered. But she could not let herself feel sorry for him, not after everything that had happened. "Are you calling to uninvite me?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "I'm calling to apologize. My family had no right to do this to you." "But you're still marrying her." The silence stretched between them like a canyon. Finally he spoke. "Yes, the wedding is still happening." "Then I'll see you there, James. I wouldn't miss it for the world." She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking again, but this time from excitement rather than fear. They wanted to humiliate her, but she was going to turn their game against them. Leela spent the rest of the evening planning. She made appointments with her hairstylist, her personal shopper, and her driver. She scheduled meetings with her business partners to ensure everything would run smoothly while she took a few days off. 3 years ago, she had left their marriage with nothing but her dignity and a small savings account. Now she owned 3 successful businesses, a penthouse apartment, and more money than James's family could imagine. They had tried to break her spirit, but instead they had forged it into something unbreakable. As she prepared for bed, Leela looked at the invitation one more time. They had signed their own defeat when they decided to invite her. They had no idea that the broken woman they had destroyed no longer existed. She was about to show them what happened when you underestimated a queen. The next morning, Leela woke with a sense of purpose she had not felt in years. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse, casting golden light across the marble floors. This was her domain now, her kingdom built from determination and pain. She made her coffee and sat at her dining table, which overlooked the city skyline. 3 years ago, she had been living in a tiny apartment, crying herself to sleep every night. Now she owned the entire top floor of one of the most expensive buildings in the city. Her phone buzzed with messages from her team. Her marketing company had 3 major campaigns launching next week. Her restaurant was booked solid for the next 2 months. Her clothing line was being featured in fashion magazines. The broken wife they remembered no longer existed. "Good morning, boss," Nicole's voice came through the intercom. As her best friend and business partner, Nicole had keys to the penthouse and often arrived early to discuss the day's plans. "Morning, Nicole. Ready to help me plan the performance of a lifetime?" Nicole walked into the dining room carrying a tablet and wearing a knowing smile. "Girl, I've been ready since you told me about this crazy plan. I already called your stylist. She's cleared her entire day." They spent the morning going through every detail. Leela's dress needed to be perfect, elegant enough to fit their high society standards, but stunning enough to make every person in that room stop and stare. Her jewelry needed to whisper wealth without screaming desperation. Her car needed to announce her arrival without looking like she was trying too hard. "What about James?" Nicole asked carefully. "Have you thought about what you'll say to him?" Leela stared out at the city below. "I've thought about it every day for 3 years, but I'm not going there for him. I'm going there for me." At noon, they drove to the most exclusive boutique in the city. Leela's stylist, Patricia, was waiting with champagne and a selection of gowns that cost more than most people made in a year. "Darling," Patricia said, kissing Leela's cheeks, "when you called about needing to look like royalty, I knew exactly what you needed." The first dress was beautiful but too sweet. The second was stunning but too obvious. The third dress made both women gasp when Leela stepped out of the dressing room. It was midnight blue silk that seemed to capture light and hold it. The cut was perfect for her figure, elegant and sophisticated without being revealing. When she moved, the fabric flowed like water. The color made her dark skin glow like she was lit from within. "That's the one," Nicole whispered. "You look like you were born to wear it." Next came shoes, heels high enough to command attention, but comfortable enough to last through an entire wedding reception. Then jewelry, diamonds that caught the light but were classic enough to never go out of style. Every detail had to be perfect. While Patricia handled the final alterations, Leela went to her hair appointment. Her stylist, Marcus, had worked with her for 2 years and understood exactly what she wanted. "We're going for queen, not princess," she told him. "Honey, you were born a queen. I'm just going to make sure everyone else can see it." He worked for 3 hours, creating an elegant updo that showed off her graceful neck and strong shoulders. A few carefully placed curls framed her face, softening the look just enough to appear effortless. "Now for makeup," he said, leading her to the makeup chair. The makeup artist created a look that was flawless but natural. Her skin looked perfect, her eyes were defined but not dramatic, her lips were the perfect shade of wine that complemented the dress. When she looked in the mirror, she saw the woman she had always been inside, confident, beautiful, and powerful. "James is going to lose his mind when he sees you," Nicole said as they left the salon. "This isn't about James," Leela replied, but her heart skipped anyway. That evening, she stood in her walk-in closet, looking at the dress hanging there like armor waiting for battle. Tomorrow she would walk into a room full of people who had treated her like dirt. Tomorrow she would face the man who had promised to love her forever but had chosen his family's approval over their marriage. Her phone rang. James again. This time she answered. "Leela, please don't come tomorrow, my family. They're not good people, they'll try to hurt you." I know exactly who your family is, James. I was married to you for 2 years, remember? Then you know why I don't want you there. I don't want them to hurt you again. His voice sounded genuinely concerned, which made her angry. Where had this concern been when his mother was serving her on paper plates? Where had it been when his father was asking her to clean up after dinner parties? I can take care of myself now, she said. I'm not the same woman you divorced. Leela, I never wanted the divorce. You know that. But you didn't fight for me either. The truth hung between them like a sword. He had let his family destroy their marriage without putting up a real fight. He had chosen the easy path over the right path. I was weak, he admitted. I was a coward and I lost the best thing that ever happened to me. Yes, you did, but that's not my problem anymore. She hung up and turned off her phone. Tomorrow would be difficult enough without listening to his excuses tonight. Leela poured herself a glass of wine and sat on her balcony, looking out at the city lights. 3 years ago, she had been planning her future with James. Now she was planning to show his family that they had underestimated the wrong woman. She thought about the early days of their relationship, when James had pursued her with such determination. He had seen her strength then, had admired her independence. Somewhere along the way, his family had convinced him that those same qualities made her unsuitable to be his wife. Tomorrow she would remind him what he had given up. Not to win him back, that ship had sailed long ago, but to show him and his family and herself that their rejection had not broken her. It had made her stronger. The invitation sat on her coffee table, no longer looking like a weapon. Now it looked like an opportunity. They had invited her to watch their victory, but she was going to show them her own. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Leela woke early, her stomach fluttering with anticipation rather than nerves. Today was the day she had been preparing for, mentally and emotionally, for 3 years. She took a long bath, using oils that made her skin glow. She ate a light breakfast and drank green tea to keep her calm. Every movement was deliberate, every choice calculated. This was not just getting ready for a wedding, this was preparing for war. Nicole arrived at 10, carrying flowers and champagne. Liquid courage, she offered, holding up the bottle. I don't need courage today, Leela replied. I need clarity. Instead, she drank water and did her morning meditation. She needed to be completely present for what was about to happen. No alcohol to cloud her judgment or dull her senses. At noon, she began the transformation. First, the undergarments that would make the dress fit perfectly, then the dress itself, which seemed to come alive when she put it on. The silk moved with her body like it was made for her. Nicole helped with the jewelry, diamond earrings that caught the light when she moved, a bracelet that was elegant without being flashy, and a necklace that drew attention to her graceful neck. The shoes came next, designer heels that added 4 inches to her height and made her legs look endless. She practiced walking in them, making sure her stride was confident and smooth. Finally, the hair and makeup. Her updo was perfect, not a strand out of place. Her makeup was flawless but looked natural. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who belonged in any room at any event with any group of people. You look like you should be on the cover of a magazine, Nicole said, stepping back to admire their work. I look like myself, Leela replied, the self they never bothered to see. At 2 o'clock, her driver arrived. She had hired the most expensive car service in the city, complete with a Rolls-Royce that was longer than some apartments. The driver, dressed in a perfect uniform, opened the door for her like she was royalty. Where to, ma'am? He asked. She gave him the address of the country club where the wedding was being held. The same country club that had lost her membership application when she was married to James. The same country club that had somehow never had availability when she wanted to host events there. The drive took 40 minutes, giving her time to center herself. She watched the city give way to suburbs, then to the manicured lawns and perfect gardens of the wealthy. This had been her world once, briefly, when she was married to James. Now she was returning as a conqueror rather than a supplicant. The car pulled up to the country club just as the ceremony was scheduled to begin. Perfect timing, she would miss the wedding itself but arrive for the reception when everyone was relaxed and unprepared for her entrance. Wait here, she told the driver. I may need to leave quickly. She walked up the steps to the country club, her heels clicking on the marble. The doorman who had once looked right through her now scrambled to open the door. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Are you here for the Whitmore wedding?" "Yes, I am." She handed him the invitation, watching his eyes widen as he read her name. Word would spread quickly that Leela Johnson had actually shown up. The cocktail reception was in full swing in the main ballroom. She could hear laughter and conversation through the closed doors. She took a deep breath, checked her reflection one more time in the hallway mirror, and nodded to the staff member waiting to announce her. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice carried across the room, "Ms. Leela Johnson." The double doors opened and she stepped into the ballroom. The effect was immediate and electric. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Every head in the room turned to look at her. She moved into the room with the grace of a dancer and the confidence of a queen. Her dress flowed behind her like liquid midnight. Her diamonds caught the chandelier light and threw it back in brilliant flashes. Her smile was serene and mysterious. The crowd parted as she walked through, unable to look away. She heard whispers following in her wake. "Is that really James's ex-wife? She looks incredible. I heard she was broke after the divorce. Look at that dress, it must have cost a fortune." She made her way to the bar, ordered champagne, and turned to survey the room. In the corner, she spotted James's parents, Victoria and Harrison Whitmore. Victoria's face had gone pale, her mouth slightly open in shock. Harrison looked like he had swallowed something unpleasant. Other guests were staring openly now, no longer pretending to have their own conversations. She had achieved exactly what she wanted. She was the center of attention at someone else's wedding. Then she saw him. James stood near the head table, his new bride beside him in her white gown. But he was not looking at his bride. He was staring across the room at Leela with an expression she could not quite read. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom. For a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the room. She lifted her champagne glass in a small salute, smiled, and turned away. The message was clear. She had come, she had conquered, and she was not the broken woman they remembered. Behind her, she heard Victoria Whitmore's voice, shrill with panic. "How dare she show up here looking like a queen," someone finished. Leela smiled and took another sip of her champagne. The real performance was just beginning. As Leela moved through the reception, accepting compliments and surprised greetings from people who barely acknowledged her 3 years ago, her mind drifted to how it all began. The memories came in waves, bittersweet and sharp. She had met James at a charity auction 5 years ago. She was there representing her small marketing firm, trying to network and grow her business. He was there because his family supported the charity, looking bored and checking his watch every few minutes. Their first conversation had been about the auction items. She was admiring a painting by a local artist, talking about how art should be accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. He had approached her, intrigued by her passion. "You don't think art belongs in places like this?" he had asked. "I think art belongs everywhere," she had replied. "But I also think when rich people buy art for charity, they should make sure the charity actually helps people instead of just making them feel good about themselves." He had laughed, a real laugh that transformed his whole face. "You're not wrong. Half the people here probably can't even pronounce the artist's name." They had talked for an hour about art, about charity, about the difference between helping people and helping yourself feel better about not helping people. She had been surprised by his intelligence and his willingness to question the world he had been born into. When he asked for her number, she almost said no. Rich white men who slummed it with women like her were nothing new. But something in his eyes had seemed genuine. Their first date was at a small restaurant she chose, not one of the fancy places he probably usually went to. He showed up in jeans and a t-shirt, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. They talked until the restaurant closed, then walked around the city for another 2 hours. "I feel like I can be myself with you," he had told her that night. "Like I don't have to perform or live up to anyone's expectations." She had felt the same way. With James, she could be the successful businesswoman she was becoming, not the stereotype people expected her to be. Their relationship had moved quickly after that. He started spending most nights at her apartment, preferring her cozy space to his sterile penthouse. He cooked for her, helped her with her business plans, supported her dreams in ways no one ever had. 6 months later, he proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant or in front of a crowd, but on a quiet Sunday morning in her kitchen while she was making coffee. "Marry me," he had said, producing a ring from his pajama pocket. "That's not really a question," she had laughed. "Leela Johnson, will you marry me and make me the luckiest man alive?" She had said yes before he finished asking. The problems started when they told his family. Victoria had insisted on meeting Leela at the country club, surrounded by her friends. The lunch had been a disaster from the moment Leela walked in. "So you're the girl James has been hiding from us," Victoria had said, her smile as sharp as broken glass. The questions had come like attacks. Where did she go to school? What did her parents do? What kind of business did she run? Each question designed to highlight the differences between Leela's background and their privileged world. When Leela had excused herself to go to the bathroom, she had overheard Victoria talking to her friends. "I don't know what he sees in her. Well, you can see what she is. This won't last long." But James had defended her that night, holding her while she cried. "They'll come around," he had promised. "They just need time to get to know you." Time had not helped. If anything, the family's disapproval had grown stronger. They made their feelings clear in 1,000 small ways, seating her at the children's table at family dinners, forgetting to include her in family photos, asking her to help serve food at parties while the other wives sat and chatted. James had tried to shield her from the worst of it, but he was fighting a losing battle. His family controlled his trust fund, his job at the family company, his entire social circle. Standing up to them meant risking everything he had ever known. The breaking point had come at their second wedding anniversary dinner. Victoria had prepared a slideshow of family photos, supposedly to celebrate their marriage. But every photo was of James with other women, his high school girlfriend, his college sweetheart, Caroline Sterling. "I thought it would be nice to remember all the women who helped shape James into the man he is today," Victoria had said with fake sweetness. The message was clear. Leela was temporary, just another woman in a long line of women who would eventually be replaced by someone more suitable. That night, James had finally exploded at his family. He had shouted at his mother, threatened to cut contact with all of them, demanded they treat his wife with respect. But the next morning, his father had called him into the office. James had come home that evening looking defeated. "They're cutting me off," he had told her quietly. "The trust fund, the job, everything, unless we. Unless you divorce me," she had finished. He had not denied it. They both knew his family would never accept her, and they both knew he was not strong enough to choose her over them. The divorce had been quick and brutal. She had taken nothing but her personal belongings and her dignity. James had cried when she signed the papers, but he had not tried to stop her. Now, 3 years later, she stood in the same country club where Victoria had first made it clear she was not welcome. But this time she was not the desperate woman trying to fit into their world. She was a successful businesswoman who had built her own empire. Across the room, she saw James watching her again. This time, she did not look away. She held his gaze, letting him see the woman he had lost, the woman his family had driven away. He started walking toward her, but his new bride caught his arm, pulling him back toward their wedding guests. Caroline Sterling, now Caroline Whitmore, was everything Leela was not. Blonde, pale, from the right family with the right background. Exactly what Victoria had always wanted for her son. Leela finished her champagne and smiled. They had gotten what they wanted, but at what cost? James looked miserable even on his wedding day. Victoria looked nervous, constantly watching Leela as if she were a threat. They should be nervous. The woman they had tried to destroy had returned, and she was more powerful than they had ever imagined. Victoria Whitmore had planned this day down to the smallest detail. The flowers were perfect, the music was elegant, and her son was finally marrying the right kind of girl. Everything was going according to plan until Leela Johnson walked through those doors. From her position near the head table, Victoria watched in growing horror as guests swarmed around her former daughter-in-law. The woman who was supposed to be broken and forgotten was clearly thriving, and everyone could see it. "She certainly looks different," said Margaret Sterling, Caroline's mother, with barely concealed surprise. She's had work done, obviously, Victoria replied, trying to keep her voice steady. All that plastic surgery and expensive clothes can't change what she really is. But even as she spoke, Victoria knew she was lying. Leela had not had surgery, she had simply grown into her own power. The nervous, eager-to-please woman who had married James was gone, replaced by someone who commanded attention without asking for it. Harrison Whitmore joined his wife, his face red with anger. I can't believe she actually came. The nerve of that woman. She's trying to embarrass us, Victoria hissed. Look at how everyone is staring at her instead of Caroline. This is Caroline's day and that woman is ruining it. But across the room, Caroline did not look upset. In fact, she was watching Leela with obvious admiration. She's beautiful, Caroline said to her new husband. Your ex-wife is absolutely stunning. James did not respond. He could not take his eyes off Leela, could not stop thinking about how radiant she looked, how confident and self-possessed. The woman he had fallen in love with had always been beautiful, but now she glowed with success and self-assurance. James, Caroline said more firmly, people are starting to notice you staring. He forced himself to look at his bride, to smile and pretend he was paying attention to their wedding reception. But his mind kept drifting back to Leela, to the way she moved through the room like she owned it. Victoria decided she needed to take action. She could not let Leela steal attention from Caroline's wedding. She marched across the room, her friends following like an army. Leela, she said loudly, causing nearby conversations to stop. How surprising to see you here. Leela turned slowly, her smile serene and untroubled. Victoria. You look well. I'm sure you're very busy with your work. We don't want to keep you from your obligations. It was a clear dismissal, said loud enough for everyone to hear. Victoria wanted to establish that Leela did not belong here, that she was interrupting important people's important business. Oh, I'm exactly where I need to be, Leela replied smoothly. My obligations can wait. It's not every day I get to celebrate with old friends. The word friends hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone within earshot knew the history between these women, knew that friendship had never existed between them. Yes, well, Victoria stammered, clearly not expecting this response. I hope you're managing. After the divorce, I mean, it must have been difficult starting over with nothing. This was the moment Victoria had been waiting for, the chance to publicly remind everyone that Leela had left the marriage with nothing, that she was probably struggling to make ends meet. Leela's smile widened. Starting over was the best thing that ever happened to me. It gave me the chance to build something of my own. Oh, that's nice, dear. A little job to keep you busy. 3 businesses, actually. My marketing firm has offices in 5 cities now. My restaurant was just featured in Food and Wine magazine, and my clothing line launches next month in New York Fashion Week. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's face went pale, then red, then pale again. The women behind her looked shocked. Guests who had been pretending not to listen were now openly staring. That's wonderful, Victoria managed weakly. It is, Leela agreed. Turns out I'm much better at business than I ever knew. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're not being told you're not good enough every day. The barb hit its target. Victoria flinched as if she had been slapped. Several guests made small sounds of surprise or approval. This was not the broken, desperate woman Victoria had expected to humiliate. I should let you get back to celebrating, Leela continued graciously. Caroline looks lovely. I hope she knows how lucky she is to be marrying into such traditional family. She walked away before Victoria could respond, leaving the older woman standing there with her mouth open and her plans in ruins. Harrison Whitmore had watched the entire exchange from across the room. Now he hurried to his wife's side, his face dark with anger. She's making fools of us, he muttered. She's making fools of ourselves, replied Margaret Sterling, who had also witnessed the conversation. That woman is clearly successful and happy. Inviting her here was a mistake. She was supposed to be broken, Victoria whispered. She was supposed to be desperate and pathetic, so everyone could see that James made the right choice. Instead, she looks like she could buy and sell half the people in this room, Margaret observed dryly. Across the ballroom, Other conversations were taking place. Guests who had barely acknowledged Leela during her marriage were now very interested in her businesses. Society wives who had snubbed her were asking their husbands about investment opportunities. "Did you know she owned Bloom Marketing?" one man asked his wife. "They handle all our company's campaigns. She's made us millions." "That restaurant of hers has a 6-month waiting list," another woman said. "I've been trying to get a reservation for months." Victoria listened to these conversations with growing horror. Not only had her plan failed, but it was backfiring spectacularly. Leela was not being seen as the outsider who did not belong. She was being seen as the successful businesswoman who had escaped the Whitmore family drama. James appeared at his mother's side, his face tight with suppressed emotion. "Are you happy now?" he asked quietly. "What are you talking about?" "You got what you wanted. You got rid of her. You made me choose between my family and my wife, and I chose you." "Are you happy?" Victoria looked at her son's face and saw something she had never seen before: genuine anger directed at her. "We did what was best for you," she said weakly. "No, you did what was best for you. You destroyed my marriage because you couldn't stand the thought of having a black daughter-in-law." "James, keep your voice down," Harrison warned, looking around nervously. "Why? Because people might hear the truth. Because they might realize that the great Whitmore family are just small-minded bigots who destroyed their son's happiness." Caroline appeared at James's side, taking his arm gently. "Darling, people are starting to stare. Perhaps we should go cut the cake." James looked at his new wife, then across the room at his former wife, then back at his parents. Without another word, he walked away, leaving Victoria standing there with the ruins of her perfect plan. The woman she had tried to humiliate had turned the tables completely. Now Victoria was the one who looked small and petty, while Leela looked like a queen who had graciously decided to visit the peasants. As the evening wore on, Leela found herself on the country club's terrace, away from the crowd and noise. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. She stood at the railing, looking out over the perfectly manicured gardens, her champagne glass forgotten in her hand. She had accomplished what she came here to do. She had shown the Whitmore family that their attempts to break her had failed. She had proven to everyone that she was thriving, successful, and completely unbothered by their rejection. So why did she feel so empty? "I was hoping I'd find you alone." She turned to see James walking toward her, his tie loosened and his perfect hair slightly messed. He looked older than she remembered, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the long day. "Shouldn't you be with your bride?" she asked, not moving from the railing. "She's cutting the cake with our mothers." "Apparently, I'm not needed for that part." He came to stand beside her, careful to maintain some distance. They both stared out at the gardens, the silence stretching between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross. "You look incredible," he said finally. "Thank you." "I mean it, Leela, you look happy, successful, everything I hoped you would be." She turned to look at him, studying his face in the fading light. "Is that what you hoped? When you signed those divorce papers, were you really hoping I'd be successful?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I knew I was making the biggest mistake of my life. But I also knew you deserved better than what my family was putting you through. So you made the choice for me." "I was a coward," he admitted. "I should have fought harder. I should have cut ties with them back then and chosen you." Leela felt old anger stirring in her chest. "But you didn't, you chose the easy path." "There was nothing easy about losing you." She looked at him again, really looked at him. The confident man she had married was gone, replaced by someone who carried regret like a heavy coat. "You look miserable," she observed. James laughed bitterly. "It's my wedding day. I should be the happiest man alive." "Should be. But you're not." "No, I'm not." They fell silent again. In the distance, they could hear music and laughter from the reception. His new wife was probably wondering where he had gone. "Why did you really come tonight?" he asked. Leela considered the question. She had told herself it was about proving a point, about showing his family they had not broken her. But standing here with James, she realized it was more complicated than that. "I needed to see who I would become," she said finally. "What do you mean?" 3 years ago when I left, I was broken. I questioned everything about myself, my worth, my intelligence, whether I deserved love. Your family made me feel like I was nothing. You were never nothing. But I felt like nothing, and I needed to come back here to this place where they tried to destroy me and see that I had not just survived but thrived. James nodded slowly. And have you seen that, I mean? Yes, I'm not the same woman who signed those divorce papers. I'm stronger now, more sure of myself. I built something beautiful from the ashes of our marriage. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. Are you? Or are you just sorry for yourself? The question hung between them like an accusation. James was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. Both, he admitted. I'm proud of what you've accomplished and I'm sorry for what I lost, what I threw away. You didn't throw me away, James. You chose your family over me. There's a difference. Is there? Before she could answer, Caroline appeared on the terrace, her wedding dress rustling as she walked. There you are, she said to James, her voice carefully cheerful. Everyone's looking for you. She glanced at Leela with curious eyes, not hostile but not entirely friendly either. I'm sorry, Caroline continued, addressing Leela directly. I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Caroline. Leela Johnson, Leela replied, extending her hand. Congratulations on your wedding. Thank you. Your dress is absolutely stunning. Thank you. The three of them stood there awkwardly, the weight of history and complicated emotions filling the air between them. I should let you two get back to your celebration, Leela said finally. Actually, Caroline said, surprising both of them, I was hoping I could speak with you, privately. James looked confused. Caroline, what are you? It's fine, James, go back inside. I'll be along in a moment. He hesitated, clearly not wanting to leave the two women alone together, but Caroline's expression brooked no argument. He kissed his wife's cheek and walked back toward the reception, leaving them alone on the terrace. This is probably the strangest conversation I'll ever have, Caroline began, but I need to know something. What's that? Do you still love him? The direct question caught Leela off guard. She studied Caroline's face, looking for signs of jealousy or anger, but found only genuine curiosity. Why are you asking me that? Because I married a man who's still in love with his ex-wife, and I need to know if she's still in love with him. Leela felt a stab of sympathy for this young woman who had just married James. Caroline was beautiful, well-bred, everything the Whitmore family wanted, but she was also perceptive enough to see what everyone else could see, that James was not fully present in their marriage. Caroline, please just answer the question. Do you still love James? Leela looked through the French doors at the reception, where James was now standing with his parents, looking uncomfortable and trapped. I love who he used to be, she said finally. I love the man I married 5 years ago, but that man doesn't exist anymore. What do you mean? The James I fell in love with was brave enough to question his family's prejudices. He was strong enough to stand up for what was right. He was willing to fight for love. And now? Now he's a man who lets other people make his most important decisions for him. That's not the man I married. Caroline was quiet for a moment, processing this answer. So you don't want him back? Even if I did, he's married to you now. That means something. But if he weren't married to me? Leela turned to face Caroline fully. Why are you asking me this? You just married him. Because I can see the way he looks at you. I saw it the moment you walked into that ballroom, and I can see the way you look at him when you think no one is watching. How do I look at him? Like your heart is breaking all over again. The words hit Leila like a physical blow. She had worked so hard to appear unaffected, to seem like she was completely over James and their failed marriage. I came here to prove I was over him, Leela admitted. And are you? I thought I was, but seeing him again. It's complicated. Caroline nodded as if this was the answer she had expected. I need to ask you something else, Caroline said, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. If James came to you tomorrow and said he had made a mistake, that he wanted to try again, what would you say? Leela stared at this young woman who was asking her to imagine stealing her husband on their wedding day. There was something almost surreal about the conversation. "Caroline, I can't answer that, it's not fair to you." "I'm not asking you to be fair to me. I'm asking you to be honest with me." "There's a difference." Leela thought about the question seriously. What would she say if James came to her tomorrow? 3 years ago, she would have said yes immediately. Even a year ago, she might have been tempted. "I would say no," she said finally. Caroline looked surprised. "Really?" "Really? Because even if he wanted to try again, I would never be able to trust him not to choose his family over me the next time things got difficult. Some wounds don't heal, Caroline. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Even if he cut ties with his family completely. Especially then, I would never want to be the reason he lost his family. That kind of sacrifice breeds resentment over time." Caroline was quiet for a long moment thinking. "Thank you for being honest with me," she said finally. "Caroline, can I ask you something now?" "Of course." "Why did you marry him? You're beautiful, intelligent, from a good family. You could have married anyone." "Why James?" Caroline smiled sadly. "Because I thought I could make him happy. Because I thought love would be enough to fill whatever hole you left in his heart. And now? Now I realize that some holes can't be filled by other people. Some wounds have to heal from the inside." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two women who had both loved the same man in different ways. "I should go back inside," Caroline said finally. "It is my wedding reception after all." "Yes, you should." Caroline started to walk away, then turned back. "Leela." "Yes." "I hope you find someone who chooses you first, every time. Without hesitation." "I hope you do too." Caroline smiled and walked back into the reception, leaving Leela alone on the terrace with her thoughts and the fading light. An hour later, Leela was back inside, making her rounds and saying goodbye to the guests she had come to impress. Her mission was accomplished. She had shown everyone that she was thriving, successful, and completely unbroken by the Whitmore family's rejection. But her conversation with Caroline had left her unsettled. The young bride's perceptiveness had forced Leela to confront feelings she thought she had buried. She was heading toward the exit when Victoria Whitmore intercepted her path, flanked by two of her society friends. "Leaving so soon?" Victoria asked with false sweetness. "It's been a lovely evening," Leela replied diplomatically. "Yes, well, we've all been so curious about your businesses. You mentioned 3 companies." Victoria's tone suggested she still did not quite believe Leela's success was real. Her friends were watching with the eager anticipation of people hoping to witness a public humiliation. "That's right," Leela said calmly. "How fascinating, and you started all of this after your divorce." "I started building my empire while I was married to your son, actually. I just finished building it after the divorce." "Your empire," Victoria repeated with a laugh. "How dramatic." Leela smiled. She had hoped to leave without another confrontation, but Victoria seemed determined to push the issue. "Would you like to see?" Leela asked, pulling out her phone. Before Victoria could respond, Leela began showing her the screen. First, the website for Bloom Marketing with its impressive client list and 5 office locations. Then the reservation system for her restaurant, showing bookings solid for the next 8 months. Finally, the pre-orders for her clothing line, already in the hundreds of thousands. "This is just the online presence," Leela explained conversationally. "The actual numbers are much more impressive." Victoria's face was growing paler with each screen. Her friends were leaning in, clearly fascinated by what they were seeing. "I'm particularly proud of the marketing firm," Leela continued. "We specialize in helping small businesses compete with larger corporations, kind of like how I learned to compete with established families." The barb was subtle but unmistakable. Victoria flinched. "Of course, the restaurant is my passion project. Fine dining with a focus on community involvement. We employ local artists, source from local farms, and donate a percentage of profits to literacy programs." "How much?" asked one of Victoria's friends, apparently forgetting whose side she was supposed to be on. 15% of net profits. Last year that was just over $2 million. The woman gasped. Victoria looked like she might faint, and the clothing line is really taking off. We focus on professional wear for women of all sizes and backgrounds. The idea is that every woman should be able to dress like she belongs in any room she enters. "What's your net worth?" the second friend asked bluntly. Victoria shot her a horrified look, but the question was out there now. Leela smiled. Forbes estimated it at around 50 million last month, but that was a conservative estimate. "I prefer to keep my exact finances private." The silence that followed was deafening. $50 million was more than many of the families at this wedding were worth. It was certainly more than James was worth on his own. 50 million, Victoria whispered. Give or take, money stops feeling real after a certain point, doesn't it? Victoria's friends were staring at Leela with new respect, clearly reevaluating everything they thought they knew about James's ex-wife. How? Victoria asked weakly. Hard work, good decisions, and the motivation that comes from having people tell you you're not good enough. Leela put her phone away and looked directly at Victoria. You know what the funny thing is, Victoria? You actually did me a favor. When you made it clear that I would never be accepted in your family, you forced me to build my own family, my own success, my own life. We never meant. Yes, you did. You meant exactly what happened. You wanted me to disappear, to become nothing, so that James would forget I ever existed. Victoria could not deny it. They both knew it was true. Instead, you gave me the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. You gave me the motivation to become more successful than I ever dreamed possible. I don't understand, Victoria said, looking genuinely confused. You see, Victoria, when you told me I wasn't good enough for your son, I had two choices. I could believe you and shrink away, or I could prove you wrong in the most spectacular way possible. You proved us wrong to spite us. No, Leela said, her voice gentle but firm. I proved you wrong to save myself. The spite was just a bonus. She looked around the room one more time, taking in the faces of people who had once dismissed her and now looked at her with grudging respect. Thank you for inviting me tonight, she said to Victoria. It was exactly what I needed. What you needed for what? To finally close this chapter of my life. To see that the people who once made me feel small are actually quite small themselves. With that, she turned and walked toward the exit, leaving Victoria standing there with her mouth open and her friends buzzing with excitement about what they had just witnessed. At the door, she turned back one more time. James was standing near the head table, watching her leave. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and she saw something in his face that looked like regret mixed with pride. She nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement and goodbye. Then she walked out of the country club and into the night, leaving the Whitmore family to contemplate the woman they had underestimated. In the car, her driver asked, "How did it go, ma'am?" "Exactly as planned," she replied, settling back into the leather seats. But as they drove away from the country club, she realized that was not entirely true. She had accomplished her mission, but she had also learned something unexpected about herself. She was not just successful now, she was free. Free from the need to prove herself to people who would never accept her. Free from the pain of loving someone who was not strong enough to choose her. Free to build whatever life she wanted, with whoever deserved to be part of it. The Whitmore family had tried to break her, but instead they had set her free. The next morning, James sat in his penthouse apartment, still wearing his tuxedo pants and wrinkled shirt from the wedding. Caroline had gone to her parents' house, saying she needed space to think. The conversation with Leela had shaken something loose in both of them. His phone had been ringing all morning, friends and family members calling to talk about Leela's dramatic appearance at the wedding. Word was spreading quickly through their social circle about her success, her wealth, her transformation from the broken woman they remembered into a business empire. At noon, his parents arrived unannounced, his mother looking haggard and his father red-faced with anger. "We need to talk," Harrison announced, pushing past James into the apartment. "Good morning to you too, Dad." Victoria collapsed onto his couch like she had been physically wounded. "Do you have any idea what that woman has done to us?" "What are you talking about?" "Everyone is talking about her," Victoria said. "About her businesses, her money, her success. They're asking questions." What kind of questions? Harrison answered grimly. Questions about why we divorced our son from a woman worth $50 million. Questions about whether we're the kind of people who would destroy a marriage over race. James sat down heavily in the chair across from his parents. And what did you tell them? What could we tell them? Victoria snapped. That we thought she wasn't good enough for you, that we wanted you to marry someone from a better family. You mean someone white? Don't be ridiculous. Mom, we both know what this was really about. Just say it. Victoria and Harrison exchanged glances. For 30 years, they had danced around their prejudices with polite euphemisms and coded language. Now their son was asking them to face the truth directly. She wasn't suitable, Victoria said finally, because she was black. Because she didn't fit into our world. Our white world. Harrison stood up, pacing to the window. James, you're being unfair. We had legitimate concerns about your compatibility. Such as her background, her family, her education. Her family owns a successful restaurant. Her father is a teacher. Her mother is a nurse. She has 2 degrees from excellent universities. What exactly was wrong with her background? Victoria threw up her hands. She didn't understand our way of life. You mean she didn't accept being treated like dirt at family dinners? We never treated her like dirt. James laughed bitterly. You served her on paper plates while everyone else used china. You asked her to help serve food while the other wives sat and chatted. You seated her at the children's table at family gatherings. Those were just misunderstandings. No, Mom, those were deliberate insults designed to make her feel unwelcome. Harrison turned from the window. Even if that's true, look how it turned out. She's obviously thriving without you. That's supposed to make me feel better. It should make you realize you made the right choice. If she can be that successful without you, maybe you two weren't meant to be together. James stared at his father in disbelief. Or maybe she became that successful because losing our marriage motivated her to prove you wrong. What's that supposed to mean? It means you created your own worst nightmare. You were so afraid of having a black daughter-in-law that you turned her into someone more successful than our entire family. Victoria looked confused. I don't understand. Think about it, Mom. 3 years ago, Leela was a small business owner who loved me and wanted to be part of our family. Now she's worth $50 million and completely out of my reach. You created the very thing you were trying to prevent. What were we trying to prevent? Being shown up by someone you considered inferior. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Victoria's face went pale while Harrison's grew redder. That's not what this was about, Harrison said weakly. Then what was it about, Dad? Explain it to me. We wanted what was best for you. No, you wanted what was best for your image. You wanted a daughter-in-law who would make you look good at the country club, not one who would challenge your comfortable prejudices. Victoria started to cry, but James was past caring about his mother's tears. Do you know what Leela told Caroline last night? He continued. What? She said that even if I came to her tomorrow and begged her to take me back, she would say no. Not because she doesn't have feelings for me, but because she could never trust me not to choose you over her again. And that's bad, Victoria asked uncertainly. It's devastating, Mom. It means I destroyed the best relationship I'll ever have, and for what? So you could feel comfortable at dinner parties. Harrison sat back down, looking older than James had ever seen him. We thought we were protecting you. From what? From love, from happiness, from a woman who supported my dreams and made me a better person. From making a mistake, Victoria whispered. The only mistake I made was listening to you. James stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city where Leela was building her empire. I married Caroline because she's everything you wanted, he said without turning around. She's white, she's from the right family, she fits perfectly into your world. That's good, Victoria said tentatively. Is it? Because I don't love her the way I loved Leela. I'll never love anyone the way I loved Leela. Love isn't everything, son, Harrison said. Compatibility matters, shared backgrounds matter. You know what matters more: respect, trust. Having someone believe in you when the whole world is against you. We believe in you. James turned to face his parents. No, you don't. If you believed in me, you would have trusted me to choose the right woman for myself. We were trying to save you from a difficult marriage. Instead, you condemned me to an empty one. The room fell silent. Victoria's tears had stopped, but her face was streaked with mascara. Harrison looked like a man who was finally understanding the consequences of his actions. What do you want us to do? Victoria asked quietly. I want you to admit the truth. I want you to acknowledge that you destroyed my marriage because you're racists who couldn't stand the thought of having black grandchildren. James. Say it, Mom. Just once tell the truth. Victoria looked at her husband, then back at her son. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. We were wrong. About what specifically? About Leela, about race. About what makes someone worthy of love. It was not the full confession James wanted, but it was more than his mother had ever admitted before. What now? Harrison asked. Now you have to live with the consequences of your choices. Just like I do. And Caroline's. James thought about his new wife, about her perceptive questions and her obvious unhappiness. Caroline deserves better than a husband who's still in love with his ex-wife. You're not thinking of getting divorced again, Victoria said in horror. I'm thinking of doing what I should have done 3 years ago, making decisions based on what's right instead of what's easy. He walked to the door and opened it, clearly dismissing his parents. I need you to leave now. I have some thinking to do. Victoria and Harrison gathered their things and headed for the door. At the threshold, Victoria turned back. James, we really did think we were helping. I know, Moms. But your help cost me the love of my life. After they left, James sat alone in his apartment, surrounded by wedding gifts and the remnants of a celebration that had felt hollow from the beginning. He picked up his phone and scrolled to Leela's number, still stored in his contacts after all these years. His finger hovered over the call button, but he did not press it. She had made it clear that their chapter was closed. She had built a new life without him, and she was happy. Calling her now would be selfish, an attempt to ease his own guilt rather than respect her choices. Instead, he put the phone down and began planning what he should have done 3 years ago, putting his own happiness above his family's expectations. 2 weeks later, Caroline sat in her lawyer's office, signing annulment papers. The marriage had lasted exactly 14 days, and both she and James had agreed it was better to end it quickly rather than drag out the inevitable. Are you sure about this? Her lawyer asked. You could fight for a settlement. The Whitmore family has significant assets. I don't want their money, Caroline replied firmly. I just want my freedom. James had been generous in the annulment agreement, giving her the apartment they had planned to share and enough money to start over anywhere she wanted. More importantly, he had been honest with her about his feelings for Leela. I can't give you the love you deserve, he had told her 3 days after the wedding. It wouldn't be fair to either of us to pretend otherwise. Caroline had been hurt but not surprised. She had seen the way he looked at Leela at their wedding reception, had heard the longing in his voice when he talked about her. What will you do now? She had asked him. I don't know. Try to figure out how to live with the choices I've made. Now, walking out of the lawyer's office as a single woman again, Caroline felt lighter than she had in months. The marriage had been a mistake, but at least it had been a short one. Across town, James was in his own lawyer's office, signing different papers. These were more complicated documents that would separate his finances from his family's trust fund, papers that would give him control of his own money and his own life. You're sure about this? His lawyer asked. Once you sign these papers, your parents can't help you financially if your business ventures fail. I'm sure, James replied. He had spent 2 weeks thinking about what Leela had said, about the man he used to be versus the man he had become. The James who had fallen in love with Leela 5 years ago would never have let his family control his financial decisions. That man had been independent, strong-willed, willing to take risks for love. Somewhere along the way, he had traded that independence for security, that strength for comfort. Now he wanted it back. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. please reconsider. The family needs to stay together. He deleted the message without responding. The family had made their choice when they forced him to choose between them and Leela. Now he was making his. With his financial independence secured, James began making other changes. He sold the penthouse his parents had bought him and moved into a smaller apartment that he chose and paid for himself. He resigned from the family business and started his own consulting firm. Most importantly, he began going to therapy to understand how he had allowed his family to control his most important decisions. "What do you want now?" his therapist asked during their third session. "I want to be the man Leela fell in love with again," James replied. "Not to win her back. No, she's made it clear that ship has sailed, but for myself. I want to be someone I can respect." Meanwhile, Leela was dealing with her own aftermath from the wedding. The publicity from her dramatic appearance had brought new business opportunities and media attention. 3 magazines wanted to do features on her success story. 2 publishers were interested in a book deal about building a business empire after divorce. But despite all the positive attention, she felt restless and unsettled. The confrontation with the Whitmore family had given her closure, but it had also stirred up feelings she thought she had resolved. "You've been quiet lately," Nicole observed as they reviewed quarterly reports in Leela's office. "Just thinking about James." Leela looked up from the financial documents. "Is it that obvious?" "Girl, you've been staring out that window for 20 minutes. Either you're thinking about your ex-husband or you're planning to buy the building across the street." "I'm not thinking about buying that building." Nicole laughed. "So it is about James." Seeing him again brought back a lot of memories, good ones and bad ones. "Do you regret going to the wedding?" Leela considered the question. "No, I needed to do that. I needed to prove to myself that I had moved on." "And have you?" "I thought I had, but seeing him again, talking to him, it reminded me of who we used to be together." "That was a long time ago, Leela. People change." "I know, and the man I saw at that wedding isn't the man I married. He's weaker now, more defeated." "So why are you still thinking about him?" Leela turned back to the window, watching the city move below her. "Because part of me wonders if he could become that man again, if he wanted to badly enough. And if he could, it doesn't matter. Even if he transformed back into the man I fell in love with, too much has happened. Some bridges can't be rebuilt." But even as she said the words, Leela was not sure she believed them. Love was complicated, and despite everything that had happened, she could not deny that seeing James again had awakened feelings she thought were dead. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Leela Johnson speaking. "Ms. Johnson, this is Caroline Whitmore. Well, Caroline Sterling again, actually. Could we meet for coffee?" Leela was surprised to hear from James's ex-wife, or rather his ex-wife again. "Of course, is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, I just think we should talk." They arranged to meet the next day at a quiet cafe downtown. Leela spent the rest of the afternoon wondering what Caroline could possibly want to discuss. The next day, she arrived at the cafe to find Caroline already there, looking relaxed and happy in a way she had not looked at her own wedding. "Thank you for meeting me," Caroline said as Leela sat down. "Of course, how are you doing?" "Much better, actually. The annulment was finalized yesterday." "I'm sorry to hear about your marriage ending." Caroline smiled. "I'm not. It was the right decision for both of us." "What did you want to talk about?" Caroline took a sip of her coffee before answering. "James." "Caroline, I don't think. Please just hear me out. I'm not here to ask you to take him back or to interfere in anyone's life. I just want to tell you what I've observed." Against her better judgment, Leela found herself curious about what Caroline had to say. "All right. James has made some major changes in the past 2 weeks. He cut financial ties with his family. He moved out of the apartment they bought him. He left the family business. That's between him and his family. He's also started therapy. And he talks about you." "Caroline, not in a way that's disrespectful to our marriage, but in a way that shows he's finally understanding what he lost and why. Leela felt her heart skip a beat, but she kept her expression neutral. What's your point? My point is that I think he's becoming the man you fell in love with again, and I think you should know that. Why are you telling me this? Caroline smiled sadly. Because I spent 2 weeks married to a man who was in love with someone else, and it taught me something important about what real love looks like. Which is, real love fights for itself. It doesn't give up when things get difficult. It doesn't let other people make its most important decisions. James had his chance to fight for our love. He chose not to. You're right, but people can change, Leela. People can learn from their mistakes and become better. Even if that's true, it doesn't change what happened between us. No, it doesn't, but it might change what could happen between you in the future. Leela stared at this woman who was encouraging her to consider reconciling with her ex-husband. It was either the most generous thing she had ever witnessed or the most foolish. Why do you care? She asked. Because I believe everyone deserves a chance at real love. James and I didn't have that, but you two did. Maybe you could again. And if we did, if we somehow found our way back to each other, what would that mean for you? It would mean I helped two people find happiness. That's enough for me. Caroline finished her coffee and stood to leave. I'm not asking you to call him or see him or do anything you don't want to do, she said. I just wanted you to know that he's changing. What you do with that information is entirely up to you. After Caroline left, Leela sat alone in the cafe, turning over their conversation in her mind. Was it possible that James was really changing? And if he was, did it matter? She had built a good life without him, a successful life that brought her satisfaction and pride. Did she really want to risk that for the possibility of rekindling something that had already been broken once? But as she walked back to her office, Leela could not shake the feeling that some questions could only be answered by taking a leap of faith. 3 months later, Leela was working late in her office when the security guard called from the lobby. Ms. Johnson, there's a James Whitmore here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. Leela's heart started racing. In the months since Caroline's visit, she had heard occasional updates about James through mutual acquaintances. He had indeed separated himself from his family's business and money. He was building his own consulting firm from scratch. He had reportedly not spoken to his parents since the annulment, but he had not contacted her directly, which she had taken as a sign that he was respecting her wishes to be left alone. Send him up, she heard herself saying. While she waited for the elevator to reach her floor, Leela checked her reflection in her office window. She looked professional and successful, which was exactly how she wanted to look for this conversation. When James walked into her office, she was struck by how different he appeared. Gone was the defeated man she had seen at his wedding. This version of James stood straighter, looked more confident, seemed more like the man she had originally fallen in love with. Hello, Leela. James, this is unexpected. I know, I'm sorry for showing up without calling first. I wasn't sure you would agree to see me. What can I do for you? He looked around her office, taking in the awards on the walls, the photos of her various business ventures, the view of the city through her floor-to-ceiling windows. This is incredible, he said. Everything you've built, I'm so proud of you. Thank you. They stood there awkwardly for a moment, neither sure how to proceed. Would you like to sit down? She offered, gesturing to the chairs in front of her desk. Actually, would you like to go for a walk? It's a beautiful evening, and I've been cooped up in offices all day. Leela considered the request. Meeting in her office gave her a sense of control and power. Walking with him would be more intimate, more dangerous to her carefully constructed emotional walls. All right, she said, surprising herself. They took the elevator down in silence and walked out into the warm spring evening. The city was alive around them, people heading home from work or out for dinner, the energy of urban life pulsing through the streets. They walked for several blocks before James finally spoke. I owe you an apology, he said. A real one this time. James, we've been through this. No, we haven't. 3 years ago, I apologized for hurting you, for being weak, for making the wrong choice. But I never apologized for the real damage I caused. Leela slowed her pace, curious despite herself. What damage was that? I made you question your worth. I made you feel like you weren't good enough, when the truth was that I wasn't good enough for you. They stopped walking and faced each other on the busy sidewalk, people flowing around them like water around stones. You were everything I could have wanted in a partner, James continued. You were intelligent, successful, beautiful, kind. You supported my dreams and challenged me to be better. And I let my family convince me that none of that mattered because of the color of your skin. James, let me finish, please. I need to say this. Leela nodded, seeing something in his eyes she had not seen in years, complete honesty without reservation. I was a coward. I chose comfort over courage, conformity over love. I let racism destroy the best thing that ever happened to me, and then I compounded that mistake by making you feel like it was somehow your fault. I never thought it was my fault. Didn't you? Even a little bit. Didn't you wonder if maybe you should have tried harder to fit in, to be what they wanted? Leela was quiet, remembering those dark days after the divorce when she had indeed wondered if she could have done something differently. Maybe for a while, she admitted. That's what I'm apologizing for making you doubt yourself when you should have been doubting me. They started walking again, the conversation feeling easier in motion. What changed? Leela asked. Why are you saying this now? Therapy mostly, and seeing what I became when I chose their approval over everything I actually valued. Which was what? A shell of myself. A man who let other people make his most important decisions. Someone I didn't recognize or respect. They had walked to a small park and sat down on a bench overlooking a fountain. The setting sun painted everything in golden light. Caroline said you made some major changes, Leela said. You talked to Caroline. She asked to meet with me. She said some very kind things about you. James smiled. She's a good person. Much better than I deserved. She said you cut ties with your family. Financially, yes. I still talk to them occasionally, but I made it clear that I won't tolerate their racism anymore. If they want a relationship with me, they need to change. And have they? They're trying. It's slow progress, but my mother actually asked about you last week. Asked if you were happy. What did you tell her? I told her you were thriving in ways she couldn't imagine. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fountain and the people walking through the park. James, why are you really here? Leela asked finally. He turned to face her fully. Because I've spent 3 years learning how to be the man I should have been when I was married to you. And I wanted you to know that, even if it doesn't change anything between us. And does it change anything? That's not for me to decide. You made it clear that our chapter was closed, and I respect that. I just needed you to know that I finally understand what I lost and why. Leela studied his face, looking for signs of the weak man who had let his family destroy their marriage. But the person sitting beside her seemed different, stronger, more self-aware, more like the man she had originally fallen in love with. You do seem different, she said quietly. I am different. I had to be. Living with the knowledge of what I threw away was destroying me. So what happens now? James was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. Now I continue building a life I can be proud of. I continue trying to be the kind of man who deserves love, even if that love doesn't come from you. And us. There is no us, Leela. I understand that. I'm not here to try to win you back or to ask for another chance. I'm here because I needed you to know that I finally see clearly. But even as he said the words, Leela could hear the hope hidden underneath them. And despite every wall she had built around her heart, she felt something stirring in response. James, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Anything. If we somehow found our way back to each other and your family disapproved again, what would you do? I would choose you, he said without hesitation. Every time without question for the rest of my life. How can you be so sure? Because I've already lost you once by making the wrong choice. I would never make that mistake again. Leela felt tears threatening for the first time in months. This was the conversation she had dreamed of having 3 years ago when the wounds were fresh and her love was still bleeding. It might be too late for that, she said softly. I know, and I accept that. But I needed you to hear me say it. They sat together as the sun finished setting and the park lights came on. Around them, the city settled into its evening rhythm. I'm scared, Leela admitted finally. Of what? Of believing you. Of hoping again, of letting you break my heart a second time. I would never. You said that before, James. You promised to love me forever, and then you chose your family over me when it mattered most. You're right. And I don't know how to prove to you that I've changed, except by showing you over time. We don't have time. I can't go through years of wondering if you'll abandon me again the first time things get difficult. James was quiet, understanding the impossible position he had put them both in. How could he prove he had changed without the opportunity to demonstrate it? How could she trust him without risking her heart again? What if we started small? He asked finally. What do you mean? What if we just talk sometimes, as friends, no pressure, no expectations, just two people who used to know each other very well getting to know who they've become? Leela considered this. It felt safer than jumping back into a romantic relationship, but also more dangerous than cutting contact completely. Friends, she repeated, friends. With the understanding that friendship might be all we ever have. And you'd be okay with that. I'd rather have you in my life as a friend than not have you in my life at all. Leela looked at this man who had once been her husband, who had broken her heart and apparently learned from the experience. She thought about Caroline's words about people changing, about second chances, about fighting for love. One coffee, she said finally. Next week sometime. We'll talk as friends and see how it feels. James's face lit up with hope and gratitude. One coffee as friends. And James, if we do this, if we try to build some kind of friendship, you need to understand that it might never become anything more than that. I understand. And you need to be okay with that. I am. Having any part of you in my life again would be a gift I don't deserve. As they walked back toward her office building, Leela felt something she had not felt in 3 years, the possibility of hope. She did not know if James had really changed, if people could overcome the kind of betrayal that had ended their marriage, if love could survive that much damage. But she was willing to find out. 2 weeks later, they met for coffee at a small cafe near Leela's office. The conversation was careful at first, both of them testing the waters of this new dynamic. They talked about their work, their goals, the changes they had both made in their lives. By the end of the hour, they were laughing together for the first time in 3 years. Same time next week, James asked as they prepared to leave. Same time next week, Leela agreed. One coffee became 2, then 3. Then weekly meetings that gradually felt less like careful negotiations and more like the easy conversations they used to have when they were happy together. 6 months later, James invited Leela to the opening of his new consulting firm's second office. She came and was impressed by what he had built independently, without his family's money or connections. I'm proud of you, she told him that night over dinner. Thank you, that means everything coming from you. James, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever miss the security of having your family's support? Sometimes. But I don't miss the price I had to pay for it. Which was my integrity, my self-respect, you. That night, for the first time in almost 4 years, Leela allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to love James again. Not the broken man who had let his family destroy their marriage, but this new version who had learned to stand on his own. A year after their first coffee as friends, James asked her out on a real date. Are you sure? She asked. Once we cross that line, there's no going back to just being friends. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And if your family objects, then they'll lose their son again. But this time it will be their choice, not mine. Their first real date was at the same small restaurant where they had their first date 5 years earlier. But this time, they were different people, wiser, scarred, more appreciative of what they had found together. I love you, James told her as they walked through the city after dinner. I never stopped loving you, even when I was too weak to fight for you. I love you too, Leela replied, surprising herself with how easily the words came. But love isn't enough, James, we both know that now. What else do we need? Trust, respect, the absolute certainty that we will choose each other over everyone and everything else when it matters. You have all of that from me. For the rest of my life. And you have it from me, but if you ever make me question that again. I won't, I swear to you, Leela, I will never give you reason to doubt my commitment to us again. 2 years later, James proposed to her again. This time there was no family pressure, no outside interference, no question about whether they were right for each other. This time when Leela said yes, it was with the full knowledge of what love could survive and what it required to thrive. Their second wedding was small and private, attended only by people who genuinely supported their union. Caroline was there, having become a true friend to both of them. Nicole was the maid of honor. James's parents were not invited, a decision that caused some drama but no regret. Do you think we'll make it this time? Leela asked James on their wedding night. I think we already have, he replied. We survived losing each other. Everything else is going to be easy. And for the first time in years, Leela believed in forever again.